Thank you for coming. Is the mic volume good for everybody back there?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Betsy Mulligan-Daig. I'm the director at the Jeannette Rankin Peace Center. And if you're not a member of the Peace Center, you better get down there and join, because members are the ones that give input to us to figure out what kinds of speakers we bring, what kinds of activities we do, and also the membership funds help us to make that happen. So if you're not a member, there's some membership applications out at the table, and also signing up for our electronic newsletter that we send out every week to let folks know what we're up to. I have a couple of announcements. If you would turn your cell phones off. We are recording this MCAT is recording this, I should say, and we'll be airing it later on for those unlucky folks who weren't here tonight. Also, very good friends of ours and colleagues, Missoula Moves to Amend is tabling outside, so I encourage you to stop by and find out what they're doing to combat Citizens United and organize and work on that. So they're out there and they've got lots of information. Also, we have, are there any quilters in the room? Peace quilters? One. The Peace Quilters gifted the Peace Center with a beautiful quilt that they made to help us raise money for a new roof. So I have a picture of the quilt out of the table and raffle tickets if you're interested in it. It is a stunning quilt, really, and if you want to come to the Peace Center and see it, we have it on display, but it is worth seeing. I've also wanted to let you know, this is pretty relevant to what David is talking about, is this week the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the latest round of the closed-door negotiations are happening, and if you're not familiar with that, it's the latest free trade agreement. The best thing that we can do right now is encourage Congress not to fast-track that legislation and encourage more dialogue about it and more about exactly what that means for us and other countries. Tester has already voted. Tester's already declared that he's against fast-tracking it. So Daines and Baucus, however, really need to hear from you. So I encourage you to do that. And then there's a sign-up sheet out on the table out there. If you want to get involved or learn more about how you can help with that, or even find out more about free trade. And of course, everybody knows you can find out all about fair trade at the Fair Trade Store at the Peace Center, right? Yes. So we live in a pretty complicated world, and one of the things that I think is changing a lot is journalism. And of course, with the internet and all of the information that we see and hear and receive, I think one of the tenets of the Peace Center is that an educated, engaged citizenry is a basis of democracy. And this guy, this familiar voice to all of us on Mondays at 1 o'clock, is a huge part of the essential part of that communication for democracy. For 28 years, he's produced the alternative radio, founded it, directed it, and it is an alternative voice. It's a very thoughtful and provocative assessment of what's going on in the world, stories and voices of people that you don't hear in other media sources. So we all recognize his voice. Even the waitress at dinner tonight recognized his voice. It may not be good. You know, he does this without corporate sponsorship, which I think is applaudable. And so, you know, thank you for making a donation to help us bring him here. These books and these things that he sells are the way that he keeps able to do that. So if you're able to help him also be able to continue this important work, because it is so vital that we have voices like this that are willing to tell us the why and the story behind the stories that we see flashing on the internet. So I'm going to turn it over to this familiar voice, David Barsamian. Welcome, and thank you all for being here.
Well, good evening, Missoula. How you doing out there? It's great to see all your smiling faces. I hope I give you some reason to cheer tonight. Thanks so much to Betsy and the work of the Rankin Center, which has to be one of the most extraordinary organizations, not just here in Missoula, but in the entire Rocky Mountain region. There are very few towns and cities that have something comparable to the Rankin Center. So it's something to be cherished. I hope you're all members. Don't take anything for granted. And if you're looking for something to do, if you have some volunteer time, it would be a great opportunity for you to help out an truly extraordinary resource that you have here, named after one of the most remarkable representatives we've ever had in the United States. And when I think of the Rankin Center and the work of Betsy and other activists, I remember Margaret Mead's quote about never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And we've seen that in some of our own lifetimes with Rosa Parks, with her act of civil disobedience in Montgomery, Alabama in December of 1955, which sparked the civil rights movement, and right down to the present day. Mohamed Bouazizi, maybe not a name known to many of you, a Tunisian street vendor who was fed up with the corruption in Tunisia, fed up with being shaken down for bribes by the cops and government officials. And in frustration, he immolated himself. He set himself on fire and died. And that proved to be the spark that ignited the Tunisian revolution and the overthrow of the Ben Ali dictatorship. Not in 3 months or 3 years, but in 3 weeks, this seemingly impregnable edifice back to the hilt by the United States completely collapsed, and Ben Ali fled the country and went to Saudi Arabia. In Egypt, shortly after Tunisia, the same kind of thing happened. There was a massive uprising, and the seemingly invincible Mubarak dictatorship was, in total disarray. He was put under arrest. Of course, things in Egypt are still in flux, and I just finished a program which you'll be hearing on KUFM in early December on the unfinished Arab revolutions. This is to say that individuals matter and groups matter, citizens matter. And when citizens act, either individually, but most important, collectively, they can have a tremendous impact on society. We've seen that here in this country. We've seen it in other countries as well. Now, one of my mentors, I've really been lucky to do this work for over almost 3 decades now, working with people like Noam Chomsky and Edward Said and Richard Wolff and others. But Howard Zinn has a very special place in my heart, and he not only is the author of A People's History of the United States, but he was one of my guides and mentors. And he always taught me also to use humor in presentations. You can get really heavy, but it's also important to inject a little bit of humor. So I'm going to do a couple of things kind of in memory of Howard. Hey, NSA, who are you going to spy on today? Hey, TSA, who are you going to pull over today? UAVs rain death from the skies. Pilotless drones will blow out your eyes. Look out, here comes the FBI. IEDs, RPGs, WMDs, NSC, CIA, DEA. There goes the USA. There goes the USA. There goes the USA. I have here, by the way, a very subversive document. I don't know if I should even share it with this audience. It's called the Constitution of the United States. the few people here old enough to remember, it's kind of an archaic document, you know, that these fuddy-duddies a couple centuries ago put together. They must have been in a drunken stupor on meth or ecstasy or something. But a couple of interesting little things here you might want to remember. Congress shall make no law prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. That's Amendment 1 to the Constitution. Then we have a very obscure amendment, Amendment 4, the right of people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue, but upon probable cause supported by the oath of affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Here we have Amendment 6. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial. So we can see in our own lifetime, particularly since September 11th, how those basic rights have been diminished, eviscerated, and essentially hollowed out. We now live in a national surveillance state. We are in the United States of fear. Why we should be in a state of fear is, of course, brought home to us constantly by a media system that heightens awareness of imaginary threats to the United States. And so we have to then eliminate or lessen the very democratic freedoms which we are supposed to be protecting. So it's a kind of, it's a way beyond any kind of Orwellian scenario that you can imagine. And I think it's a very dangerous moment for the country and for the planet as well. I don't want to be overly dramatic, but freedoms once lost are very difficult to regain. And we are on, again, I don't want to, be overly hyperbolic here. We are on a steady drift toward more and more of an authoritarian state and more of totalitarian rule as our basic freedoms are being eliminated. And the only thing that is going to roll that back is when people stand up and say, basta. And if a poor fruit vendor, street vendor in Tunisia, in the town of Sidi Bouaziz can do it, people can do it here as well. And I know in Montana, in Colorado, in New Mexico, where I was just a couple of weeks ago, there is a lot of citizen concern and opposition toward what is happening in the country. Now, just yesterday, I flew in from the Denver airport, where one is, asked questions, searched, frisked, and all of that. It's all part of this growing apparatus of surveillance and of monitoring of our activities. And now, they've just built this $2 billion building in Utah, which is going to store all of our electronic communications, text messages, emails, phone calls. Again, this is something way beyond anything that Orwell imagined in 1984 or Aldous Huxley in Brave New World. The surveillance state is growing, and this too under a constitutional, liberal, democratic president. One can only imagine the uproar if George W. Bush and Dick Cheney tried to pull some of the things that Obama has been essentially given a free ride on. And I did talk about heroes like Rosa Parks and Mohamed Bouazizi, the Tunisian street vendor. Let's not also forget the incredible contribution that Chelsea Manning made in releasing hundreds of thousands of documents to WikiLeaks at great personal risk. It's nothing for me to travel here and speak in front of a group of people, but he really put his life on the line, and he's paid a horrible price, including torture, which involved 8 months in solitary confinement at the U.S. Marine base in Quantico, and he has been now sentenced to 35 years in prison for releasing documents. Now, this raises a very important and moral question in any kind of society. If you are, as a citizen, if you're confronted with evil, if you're confronted with overt criminality, let's say in your workplace, you know that your boss is cooking the books and stealing money and paying off government officials or inspectors or whatever. What is your responsibility? What is a citizen to do when confronted with criminality? Remain silent? Well, that's what millions of Germans did in the 1930s. That's what millions of Italians did. That's what many people have done under dictatorships and totalitarian rule. But here's someone whose conscience moved him not for profit. I mean, he and Edward Snowden, another heroic figure, have taken enormous risks. Now, Manning has been thrown into the slammer. If you open your mouth, they'll throw the book at you. So instead of celebrating dissidents, instead of celebrating people who believe in democracy and the free exchange of information, we are punishing them. What kind of signal is that sending to other potential whistleblowers? The Espionage Act was passed, I believe, in 1920 or 1919. This administration has prosecuted more citizens under the Espionage Act than all previous governments going back to 1919, 1920. Again, extraordinary development. Liberal Attorney General, Eric Holder, everybody, likes him. He's very well spoken. But in some respects, people are getting nostalgic for John Ashcroft, as bad as he was. I mean, that's how far things have deteriorated. So this is a fundamental question. If one is confronted by acts of evil, what is one to do? Well, you could turn away, pretend you don't see it, punch out at 5, go home, watch Law and Order and Seinfeld reruns or the NFL or whatever, and just pretend that things are going on as they should. Or you can take risks, as these brave citizens did, and look what happened to Snowden. If it weren't for Snowden, we wouldn't know in terms of evidence what everyone suspected, that Big Brother is watching. Now we have the actual information. Big Brother is not only watching its enemies, it's watching its best friends, and it's watching its entire population. To what end? Why is this information being accumulated? What is going to happen to this information? Who will delete whose names? Under what pretext is this being amassed? Well, of course, the answer is national security. So when you hear this term, what it means is shut up. That there are things out there that you don't know about that are lurking in the shadows and the darkness that I don't dare tell you about because it's top secret. So just trust us. Now, ask yourself, historically speaking, what governments have earned the trust of the people? Not too many, I would say. Maybe Luxembourg or Liechtenstein or, places like San Marino, maybe Monaco, little states like that. But large, powerful governments like the U.S., I think we should be loyal to the country, and the government will have to earn our loyalty. That's something that I learned, again, from Howard Zinn, a World War II vet who became a great advocate for Gandhian nonviolence and civil disobedience. So I think, yes, we should be loyal to the country. We should, celebrate Allen Ginsberg and beat poetry and Jack Kerouac and rock and roll and Bruce Springsteen and Lady Gaga and, whoever you're into. But, we should only celebrate and support the government when it earns our support. It's not automatic. And I think there has been a blurring of that distinction in terms of what constitutes patriotism. I feel I'm very patriotic to the country. And I will, when I see wrongdoing, when I see corrupt government actions, like illegal wars and drone strikes on innocent civilians from Pakistan to Yemen, it behooves us to speak out. It behooves us not to be silent. You probably know the famous line from Martin Niemöller, a German pastor in the 1930s, who said, first they came for the communists, and I didn't say anything because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the gypsies and the Jews. I didn't say anything. I wasn't a gypsy. I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the socialists and union organizers. Well, I didn't say anything about them. I wasn't a socialist. I wasn't a union organizer. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out. So I think speaking out is a fundamental obligation of anyone in a democratic society. We cannot lose our voice. We cannot lose our right to speak out and to be heard. And the government, the state wants conformity. The state wants silence. The state wants, the population to be distracted and to worry about things that are entirely irrelevant, like Danica Patrick, winning the NASCAR race, or, things like that, or, will Tom Cruise and Katie Huston get back together again? And, who is Madonna adopting this week in Malawi? And, those kinds of things that I call the media function as a WMD, a weapon of mass distraction. I've long advocated that we should have, when you see these talking heads, these anchors on TV, and they're called anchors for good reason. They're anchored to the establishment. They're anchored to power. They themselves are multimillionaires. They're not, like your average working class person. They're extremely well paid, and they're invited to White House dinners and lunches with the secretaries of state and golf games with the president and the like. But when you see these, Diane Sawyer and Brian Williams and Scott Pelley and all the rest, there should be a scroll underneath as they're speaking. The way that cigarette packages are rightly labeled today. If you watch this, you will get a severe migraine headache. Or this program is dangerous to your health. Pregnant women are at risk if they watch, this particular broadcast. And I know you're laughing, but I think that would give people a better sense of reality as to the propaganda that's being spewed, passing off as news. And we just see this constantly. I was reminded once again of one of the great war crimes in modern memory, the U.S. attack on Iraq, for which the Iraqi people are still paying an enormous price. And the prosecutors of that war, that phony war that was sold to us, and the media acting as a kind of conveyor belt of lies, Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld and Douglas Feith and Paul Wolfowitz. I mean, when the history of this period is written, if there is a history in 100 years, I'm not joking, it'll scarcely be believed that these people were out there and producing the kinds of fabrications and inventions and distortions that drove this country into war. I mean, they should be doing time in Leavenworth. And Bradley Manning, Chelsea Manning, He should be out. He should be walking the streets, whereas actual criminals are not only free, quote unquote, but they write their memoirs, usually ghostwritten, paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, then go on book tours. I have to tell you that, the number one criminal, George W. Bush, was at the University of Denver in September. I'm not making this up. University of Denver gave George W. Bush a Global Humanitarian Award. Yes, a Global Humanitarian Award. Well, maybe killing hundreds of thousands of Iraqis and Afghans qualifies someone to get a Global Humanitarian Award. One of these, even like a lower echelon person like Douglas Feith. Does anyone even remember who he was? He was under Wolfowitz in the War Department, one of the architects of the Iraq War. He is now a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. And he appears on talk shows as an expert. He gives his opinion on the NewsHour on PBS, and he's treated with great dignity and reverence. I want to pull my hair out when I see these kinds of outrages, and then when you see actual courageous human beings do something for the country, they're punished. Look what's happened to Snowden. He spoke out. He leaked this information to Glenn Greenwald, who then published it in The Guardian. Then Der Spiegel published it, and then the New York Times and the Washington Post as well. What's happened to Snowden? He's been threatened. He's been hounded. His passport has been revoked by the liberal Secretary of State, John Kerry. I think that's absolutely outrageous. I think we're lucky to still have people of conscience, in and out of the government, who will cross that line, who will take a stand, as Rosa Parks did in 1955. And I think, rage is a proper response. And I know that, Martin Luther King said, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but one must take it because one's conscience tells one that it is right. And I think that's, absolutely important, and it's incumbent upon us while we still have space to breathe. I'm not saying we're not yet in that totalitarian dungeon, but while we still have space, we should use these opportunities and expand that space, and not to cower in fear, because that's exactly the outcome that the state, that corporate elites want to produce. Don't bother, the game's over. Deal with more important things like, whether, Peyton Manning's going to win a Super Bowl with the Denver Broncos, or, what's going to happen to the U of M football team this year, and those kinds of issues. I think this is what we need today. And one of the other things I do, as I said with Howard Zinn, using humor. This is a character that I created a few years ago. He occasionally follows me around the country, and I hope you'll enjoy him. Dun, 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 dun. We interrupt this program from Missoula, Montana, to bring you this breaking news story from TIBC, the Truth in Broadcasting Corporation, from our world corporate headquarters in a secure underground location in Area 51 in Nevada. I'm Dick Veneer, your glib and banal anchor of facade news, the 24/7 newscast dedicated to keeping you in the dark. We go straight to the surface of a story, and we stay there. No one can challenge our in-shallow reporting. We are dedicated to the highest standards of journalism. Our credos, unfair and unbalanced. We deceive, you believe. Ladies and gentlemen, an amazing news story coming across our desk at this very moment. According to KUFM, an obscure radio station, they are reporting that Ben Bernanke, Hank Paulson, Alan Greenspan, Timothy Geithner, Larry Summers, Lloyd Blankfein, and other government officials and bankers have been arrested for financial crimes against the people and planet Earth. Also taken into custody were Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity, Cokie Roberts, Diane Sawyer, Brian Williams, Scott Pillay, Robert Siegel, and Wolf Blitzer for lying to the American people. They were all found in locked embrace in a bunker under the Higgins Avenue Bridge with trillions of dollars in cash and a stash of World Wrestling Federation DVDs, and a massive collection of Pat Boone and Kenny G and Barry Manilow CDs, and scores of used Papa John's pizza boxes. The arrests were made by a heretofore unknown group calling itself MLF, MLF, the Missoula Liberation Front. According to Betsy, a so-called spokesperson for this group, who will not give her last name incidentally, she said, "This action is long overdue. We're dedicated to nonviolence and did not use force, but we had to act. We could no longer wait for the Obama administration to enforce the law. These guys must face justice," she said with her voice rising in indignation. The prisoners in foot shackles and handcuffs, in orange jumpsuits, and with black cloaks over their heads, were later reported to have defiantly shouted at their captors, "Do you know who we are? We are the masters of the universe. We rule the world." And then, inexplicably, each prisoner began to sob and said, "I want my mommy." If convicted, they'll do time at Guantanamo. You'll recall the infamous former U.S. prisoner that was returned to Cuban sovereignty in late 2013. It looks like curtains for all of these great men. Their heads were bowed as they were led away by blue-helmeted peacekeepers of MLF, the Missoula Liberation Front, headed by Commander Michael, who would also not give his last name. I'm Dick Veneer, still your glib and banal anchor. Stay tuned to Facade News on the TIBC network for updates on this breaking news story. Remember, we deceive, you believe. You either watch our news or you will be watched. Now back to our regularly scheduled program on the University of Missoula campus. And one other thing I would like to hand out is a sign-up sheet. Don't worry, I won't share this with the NSA because they already have all your information. However, there is one condition to sign this sheet. There are a few people here that might remember a class that was taught called penmanship in school. No, I guess you're all too young to remember that. People used to write clearly, cursive script. Well, often when I hand out these sheets and I get them back, I can't read 3/4 of the email addresses. So if you could kindly write clearly, that would help me enormously. Why don't we start here and pass that around. We're just going to let you know like what's happening with alternative radio and if there are any special programs. Now, last tango for democracy, from oligarchy to plutocracy to dollarocracy. A nation of sheep will beget a government of wolves. A nation of sheep will beget a government of wolves. This was not said by some radical. It was Edward R. Murrow, a CBS reporter, pretty mainstream, but I think very prescient in that observation. The recent and ongoing theatrics and posturing in Washington are a sideshow to the main event, the ongoing hollowing out of democracy. The political system in which the capitalist economy effectively functions for the few is called democracy. But in reality, it might be likened to a Sotheby's auction with the most lucrative objects, that would be Senate seats and House seats and committee chairs of important congressional committees going to the highest bidder. It's no accident. That's the way the system was designed. Madison, one of the founding fathers and someone who's revered, said it very clearly 2 centuries ago. The aim of government is to protect the opulent minority against the majority. I'll repeat that. The aim of government is to protect the opulent minority against the majority. Now, this is something the Occupy movement clearly identified as the 1% versus the 99%. We're in the now 4th year of the great economic recovery from the Great Recession. I'm sure you're all flush with tons of cash and your stocks are doing really well and your portfolios are blossoming. Well, there's been, in fact, some economic gains over the last 4 years of the so-called recovery. 95% of those economic gains have gone to the 1%. 95% have gone to the 1%. Most people that I know are like just juggling, between 1 job, 2 jobs, or 1 job with 2 shifts, working weekends. I go to this cafe in Boulder, and I was here at The Break here in town. Is that what it's called? I was kind of talking to the baristas, because you see I'm a Gemini with a motor mouth, so I'm constantly talking to people. And I said, well, what's your educational background? He said, I've got an MA, and this guy's got a BA. And I said, well, what are you doing, making cappuccinos and lattes? I said, there's no work. And it's the same thing in, liberal Boulder, which is a kind of similar kindred community in terms of Missoula. It's a big university town. Population is relatively the same. And it's the same kind of thing there. Young people who are graduating with degrees find themselves in dead-end jobs, or, what are the options? Well, you could be a greeter at Walmart. You could, bag groceries at Safeway, work for Target, work for, some other big box store. There's not a lot of opportunity now, particularly for young people. So I'm worried about what's coming up in terms of prospects for the future generation, and that was really brought home to me this afternoon when I had the great opportunity to speak to students at Hellgate High School, and I managed to keep them awake with my ranting and raving and histrionics, but I was really worried about their future, and in terms of what's happening with the planet, with global warming, with environmental degradation, which should now be so transparently clear that even the most fanatical climate deniers will have difficulty in trying to posit that this is not happening, that it's just it's a concoction, it's an invention of some scientists who are trying to get rich, and selling us this bill of goods. I think it's a very, very serious situation, and like that Pastor Niemöller thing I just described, I can see that exact same thing happening with the planet. First, the water came and took away the Maldives. Well, who knows where the Maldives are, right? You can't even find it on a map. Then the water came and took away Tonga and the Marshall Islands, and well, they're just little islands. Then the water came and it took away Bangladesh. Well, they're in Asia, too many people anyway. And then, the water came to Seattle, to New York, to Miami. That is what is looming unless there is a radical transformation in thinking. This is what is really required, because business as usual and the little, cosmetic touches here and there, it's not going to do it. I'm sorry, a little blusher here, a little eye makeup here, a little lipstick here, that's not going to resurrect this body, which is in acute distress. We need a complete economic rethink about what constitutes growth. What is prosperity? Is it the same path that we've been pursuing? the endless extraction of fossil fuels. I mean, it's not a secret. I mean, Montana has one of the biggest coal reserves in the world, not just in the US. And just in the short time I've been in Missoula, I mean, how many trains have I been seeing back and forth? And I was in Sandpoint, Idaho, and Moscow, Idaho, and Spokane, where there have been large actions trying to block the trains from the coal coming through, because every single piece of coal that is burnt is going into the atmosphere and is contributing to global warming. This is indisputable. Coal is the dirtiest of all the fossil fuels. And we have to think about a different way of looking at this economy. Now, I don't know what that is, but this system is not working. It's producing environmental outcomes that will saddle future generations with horrific outcomes that we can, if the current trends continue. And, this has been going on. I mean, I feel like a Cassandra at this point, going around and talking to audiences about this particular crisis. But this was a document issued in 1992 by 1,700 world scientists called Warning to Humanity. And it said here in its introduction, human beings and the natural world are on a collision course. Human activities inflict harsh and often irreversible damage on the environment and on resources. If not checked, many of our current practices put at serious risk the future that we wish for human society and the plant and animal kingdoms, and may so alter the living world that it will be unable to sustain life in the manner that we know. Fundamental changes are urgent if we are to avoid the collision our present course will bring about. Now, that was issued in 1992. What's happened since then? Rio, Copenhagen, Durban, Kyoto, Warsaw, climate summit after climate summit, where what happens? Well, first of all, they're hijacked by corporations who, basically create the outcomes that are most favorable to them. And you have delegates, issuing very lofty sounding press releases while they're sipping this or that Cabernet Sauvignon or this Merlot and comparing the two and going to cocktail parties. That's what these climate summits have been doing. They're basically holding patterns for corporations to continue the plunder and looting of resources. Now, are corporations evil? Are the people that run corporations, are these bad people? This is in their DNA. They're in their DNA, in the corporate DNA of capitalism, you have to maximize profits. That's what it's about. And CEOs that don't maximize profits, who may know all of this scientific reality, understand global warming, understand the threat that it poses to humanity and to the planet, are, because of institutional imperatives, compelled to do what they're doing. In very few instances have we found CEOs of large corporations walking away from their jobs, like Edward Snowden or Bradley Manning and others, Jeffrey Hammond, I can think of other whistleblowers, and saying, this is morally wrong. I can't continue to do this. There's a New Yorker cartoon that kind of exemplifies this. There's a CEO of a large corporation, and there's a room full of stockholders, and they're all like, on their feet. We want to see more dividends. We want to see more payoff here. We're paying you $14 million a year. You get 2 months paid vacation. You've got your yacht. You've got your private jet. You wanted that house in Aspen. We bought you the house in Aspen. You wanted a penthouse in New York. We bought it for you. Come on, what are you doing? And so the CEO tells them, calm down, ladies and gentlemen. While I realize that the long-term prospects for the planet are very dire indeed, the opportunities for short-term growth are spectacular. And I guarantee you double-digit returns on all of your investments. And the audience rises and applauds, in unison. And so we have, an economic system which is not really talked about. A term like free market is basically a term of propaganda. There is no free market. The market heavily depends on government intervention. For example, in agriculture, do you know we, because we're so generous, give $14 to $15 billion in credits to big agri? Let's say Archer Daniels Midland and Monsanto and ConAgra and other large industrial agricultural corporations. We subsidize arms exports to third world countries. So the idea of a free market is in itself a kind of illusion and a fantasy. There is heavy government intervention. So just to give you another example of what happens, where did the internet come from? Oh, that was Bill Gates in a garage in Palo Alto, and he and Paul Allen, they got together and they invented the internet. We invented the internet. Our tax money through DARPA, which is the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency in the Pentagon, developed all of the technology. And then mysteriously, all of this technology is handed over to the private sector, who are now charging us for the use of the internet, which was bought and paid for and developed by taxpayer money. Most of the vaccines and breakthroughs in medicine were done where? Not in the labs of GlaxoSmithKline and Pfizer, but in the labs of the National Institutes of Health, of which we have 4 in the United States. That's where pharmaceuticals are developed, breakthroughs in medicine, and then they're all handed over, again, to the private sector. I don't know about you, I just had a bout of walking pneumonia. I hope you don't get it. Don't worry, it's not contagious. And I had to get 9 pills of antibiotics. It cost $250. I mean, I asked the pharmacist, this is a joke, right? That's like, what was the math? $80? No, $70? Yeah, something like $75 a pill. I said, this is a joke, right? She said, no. Fortunately, I was able to pay it. What do people do that who don't have money? They go without. I asked the doctor that. What do? They go without. ERs have turned into kind of, public health clinics. Many of them are closing, where people who don't have any kind of health care wind up, usually in pretty dire circumstances, because they've ignored their body. They haven't had any kind of exams or preventative treatment, and so can only go for assistance when that lump on your forehead is the size of a tennis ball, and you think there might be something wrong here. Well, at that point, it's virtually too late. The fact that we have this, atrocious healthcare, I hate to call it a system because it's a system of profit. Again, it puts profits before people. And we have, the greatest armaments in the world. The Pentagon just launched its 11th aircraft carrier. You'll be proud to know, I'm sure you're all feeling very patriotic and waving the flag, named after Gerald R. Ford. No other country has a single aircraft carrier. The United States has 11 that are patrolling the seas and presumably protecting us from the Bangladesh Navy or the Cambodian Navy. I know you're laughing, but I live in Boulder, and a day doesn't go by when I don't see Laotian Air Force planes, flying right over Boulder. And I'm wondering, thank God for the U.S. military protecting us against those people that want to do us harms. Since the end of World War II, an event some of you may recall, the U.S. has been at virtual war or on the edge of war. It's been almost nonstop. We have become a warfare state. We have a permanent war economy that is dependent on conflict, not conflict resolution, not peace, but on conflict. And we see this being repeated over and over again. And we have an enormous amount of money for the, I like to really quote radical people, not like Noam Chomsky, but Dwight D. Eisenhower. Now, if he were alive today, he's a president of the United States. For some of you who may not know who he was, two-time Republican president, a commander of all Allied forces in World War II, much decorated commander of all forces at Normandy beachhead, etc. If he were alive today, he would not only have no place in the Republican Party, he'd have no place in the Democratic Party. That's how far the political spectrum has shifted to the right. It was Eisenhower who warned the country. This is from a career military man, right? This is not from Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King or some pacifist. He warned the country on January 17th of something that he found very, very disturbing, that there was a growing military-industrial complex that, if it were allowed to develop, would undermine democracy. And we can see, if Eisenhower were alive today, that he greatly understated the problem. You see the power of Lockheed Martin and Boeing and Northrop Grumman, Honeywell and United Technologies and all the other military contractors who are number one in selling arms around the world. And it was Eisenhower, just so I ended with his speech at the end of his term, January 17th, 1961. Well, in 1953, when he first assumed office, this is what he said. Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired, signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. I think we should listen to voices like Eisenhower who are counseling for peace and sanity and who are trying to roll back the Pentagonization of the economy. Now, you know that the supporters of the military-industrial complex, they'll say, well, it's about jobs. Yes, it's about jobs, but what they don't tell you is that it's about very few jobs, because weapons systems are extremely capital intensive. They're not labor intensive. They don't require lots of workers. You need a cadre of engineers and designers to put systems together. You can employ many more people building roads, schools, parks, as was done during the 1930s under the New Deal, under Franklin Roosevelt, during the Works Progress Administration, when many of the trails that we now walk on in national parks were built by WPA and the WPA programs. Schools, swimming pools in New York City. I remember growing up, and there was a plaque in this couple of pools in Manhattan where I lived, built in 1935 or 1936 by the WPA. Those kinds of things, are not jobs that would really be productive and help the society are not being created. But capital-intensive jobs going to weapons systems are getting an enormous amount of funding. So let me just continue with this last tango for democracy. We do have procedural democracy in our country, and they're called elections. So every 4 years, we're asked to vote for this or that candidate, and then basically disappear, and then come back in another 4 years, and don't rock the boat. But these elections have become farces. I mean, I'm sorry to say, they've become $1 billion campaign spending extravaganzas. They've become cash cows for television stations. they generate enormous amounts of profits, the campaign ads for these, for the media. I think we should have now, I'm proposing, numbers on the backs of our so-called representatives, which will help us understand who they actually represent. So say number 1 is ExxonMobil, number 4 is Chevron Texaco, number 7 is IBM. Then we'll know who they're really backing and who they represent. And there will also be sell-by dates to ensure that the money keeps coming. Now, the Supreme Court's infamous Citizens United decision of January 2010, allowing corporate money to flood politics further corrodes and corrupts our democracy. In effect, it legalizes bribery. And again, you know, I like to quote conservative people like Thomas Friedman, columnist for the New York Times, Charlie Rose's favorite guest on his program, also appears on, you know, NPR's Morning Edition and All Things Considered. He said basically what we have now is a system of legalized bribery in Congress. And, but its defenders say, no, money is free speech. Sure, money is free speech. So you know, Joe Citizen and Jane Citizen, you and Sheldon Adelson and the Koch brothers, you're on a level playing field. You give your money to your candidate, and the Koch brothers will give their money to their candidate. So you see what kind of level playing field that is. A tsunami of cash drowns politics, making a farce of any notion of equality and fairness. And things may get worse. If you can imagine, right now the Supreme Court is hearing a case, McCutcheon versus the Federal Election Commission, which would virtually throw out all limits on individual campaign contributions. Now the other one, the Citizens United, made it possible for PACs to, you know, bundle money and give it to candidates. This would allow individuals to give unlimited amounts of money. And if that happens, according to one NYU law professor, it will be government of the 500 richest people. A fundamental question is never posed. What are the communication needs of a democratic society? The role of the mediocre media and press corps is crucial in the manufacture of consent, to use Walter Lippmann's phrase. So what we have now is really prostitutes that are practicing prostitution. You know, they have sold themselves to large corporations. They are not getting any dirt under their fingernails. They're doing very little investigative reporting, except for, you know, a handful of people like Glenn Greenwald and Seymour Hersh. And oh, by the way, in this kind of mosaic of gloom and doom, there is some good news as well, and that is in terms of the media. Pierre Omidyar, French-born Iranian-American and founder of eBay, is giving a huge amount of money to Glenn Greenwald, Jeremy Scahill, Laura Poitras, and other independent journalists to create investigative journalism. So this is really a huge breakthrough in the monochromatic, monolithic corporate media that we have, and that's something, you know, that should be encouraged. Also, another very positive development in recent months, I don't know about what kind of cable systems you have here, but Al Jazeera in English is now readily available on most cable systems, and it is far superior to anything produced by PBS or the BBC or any other entity. And I urge you to, you know, I think you can watch it online, Al Jazeera English. I mean, they do terrific documentaries and investigative reporting, and that's a very, very positive sign. Democracy Now! Continues to grow and expand. I know it's not on KUFM here, but you can watch it or listen to it online. That too is a very positive media development. So there are kinds of islands of audio independence, that we should be encouraging and supporting magazines like Z and The Progressive and The Nation, In These Times, Dollars and Cents, and others are well worth your attention. Now, the media are a handful of corporate conglomerates, and what is their function? To defend the class interests of the owners and the domestic and foreign policies of the state. It's a one-note samba, and they replicate the tropes of benevolence and altruism of U.S. foreign policy and promote the idea of America's indispensable role in the world. The word imperialism cannot be mentioned. So this past Monday, we were subjected again to the Arlington Cemetery ceremony where the president, whoever it is, goes there and solemnly lays the wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier and then mouths every single cliche and platitude imaginable about the sacrifice made to protect our freedoms and the freedom of people around the world. So this mythology continues, whereas the actual interventionist role of a very aggressive foreign policy is largely occluded and obscured. When I was talking to those high school students today, and I said the U.S. has 735 military bases around the world, I could just see their eyes kind of glaze over. But when I said that schools are closing, that teachers are being laid off, that tuition is going up at state universities, there I saw the eyebrows kind of go up, because that's something that they know about, or at least they've heard about. There's been consolidation of classes in Boulder, which is a pretty, well-off town. Schools have been consolidated to save money. This is going on all over the country, while the Pentagon continues to drain most of the discretionary income in the federal budget. That will only change when citizens demand change, when new Rosa Parks refuse to sit down in the back of the bus. That's when that will change. So we have all of this, rhetoric about altruism and benevolence, and occasionally, the U.S. makes a mistake, like maybe Vietnam was a mistake. Tell that to 5 million Vietnamese, Cambodians, and Laotians who were killed. Tell them that was a mistake. Tell that to the Iraqis. Tell it to the Afghans. Tell it to the Yemenis, to the Pakistanis. You see this T-shirt I have here, fighting terrorism since 1492. The indigenous population here in the United States knows something about the history of this country and the history of warfare and dispossession and theft of culture and land. And so here too is another example of the kind of myths that are propagated by the media and are repeated endlessly by the political class. This has nothing to do with Democrats or Republicans. When it comes to issues of imperialism, there's only the hawks out-hawking the other hawks. So on one extreme, you have like McCain and Graham, beating their breasts, bomb them. And on the other end, you have Clinton and Obama. Well, let's not bomb them just yet. I mean, the agreement is we have to bomb. We have to do something. We are America, the indispensable nation. We have this marvelous military, as Madeleine Albright told Colin Powell once. You've got all this great weaponry. What are you going to use it for? Aren't you going to use it? Kind of challenging him. So the idea that we are the indispensable nation, well, there are other countries historically that have said they are indispensable nations, and I won't go down the list because it's not very flattering to the United States. And in terms of the economics system, any discussions of capitalism can only be limited to rotten apples. There's never a discussion of the barrel that keeps producing these rotten apples. So let's get all virtuous about Bernie Madoff and what a terrible person he was, or now the SAC Global and Stephen Cohen, or Raj Rajaratnam, this hedge funds in New York and all these corrupt dealers and traders, like you saw in Oliver Stone's movie Wall Street, and then the sequel, Money Never Sleeps, Wall Street Part 2. They're actually kind of worth seeing. But even there, he doesn't get to the core issue, which is the system. He gets to Gordon Gekko. Do you remember Gordon Gekko? He's the infamous trader in Wall Street who's thoroughly corrupt. I mean, into insider trading. He kind of pokes at his protege, played by Charlie Sheen, the character Bud Fox. He says, everybody's cheating. Don't you know reality? This is what's going on. And that is kind of the reality. But where the film and this whole genre fails is not to talk about the system, the structures that produce this endless series of crashes and busts. Just in our lifetime, you remember Michael Milken, you remember Ivan Boesky, you remember the savings and loan scandal, you remember how many times taxpayers have gone to bail out institutions that are too big to fail and too big to go to jail. Now, even now, J.P. Morgan has been fined $13 billion. You know how much $13 billion is to J.P. Morgan? That's lunch money. It's chump change. Not only is it chump change, no one's going to jail. The bank is being fined. And furthermore, here's the kicker, it will be entirely written off their taxes as a business expense. Now, if you go out, I'm not suggesting you do this. If you go out now and fill up your car with gas and drive away from the station without paying, you're likely to be arrested and put in jail this very night for grand larceny and theft. If you go to some pizza place and walk out without paying, it's likely you'll get arrested. In fact, people are serving life sentences in certain states in the United States for having done exactly that, stealing pizza. So that system, which is what Richard Wolff talks about in Occupy the Economy and his book Democracy at Work, has to be rethought, because in terms of the environment, it's predicated on endless expansion and growth. It's predicated on plundering natural resources. We have done such a poor job, objectively speaking, of being stewards to Pachamama, what the Incas called the earth, or to Gaia, or to the Bhumi, as it's called in Sanskrit. We have done such a poor job. And the native peoples had an insight into this. Whether it's true or not, supposedly Chief Seattle said in the 1850s, he observed something about these European settlers. He said they had a tremendous acquisition for material things. They wanted more and more land, more resources, more gold, more silver, whatever it was. Accumulation, something that Marx also talked about, of course. And then what did he say? He said, ultimately, if you continue on this path, you will soil the bed in which you sleep, and you will choke on your own toxic fumes. And that's what we're looking at in terms of the next 30 or 40 years, unless we turn around this fossil fuel cycle of endless exploitation. Now, the tar sands in Canada, if that pipeline is approved, could be what James Hansen, the well-known climate scientist, has called the game changer. Game over for the climate. These are not, amateur scientists. These are people who have studied carefully information and are able to draw certain conclusions. Why would we take a risk on the future for future generations? Some of you may have children and grandchildren. Why would we take that risk? It seems so such a cavalier kind of thing to do. Where is our sense of protecting Mother Earth? This, what Carl Sagan called the Earth, this pale blue dot in the universe. If you think about it, it's a minor miracle. You know, we're surrounded by dead planets. And here is this one place where, you know, life as it is has developed. And we're not good stewards. We are not good caretakers. Why? Because profits über alles. Profits matter over everything. Sanity, public health, you know, basic common sense. You know, there's a famous quote from Anatole France. Let me see if I can find it. Probably can't. Where is it? Well, before I get to Anatole France, I have other quotes. And that is from Momentito. This is from actually a French economist, a very conservative French economist in the 19th century, Frédéric Bastiat. He said, when plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men living together in society, they create for themselves in the course of time a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. And that's precisely what we have. You know, from the C-suites, from the CEOs and the CFOs who are able to do things with impunity. And they delight in defrauding the public. Now, this Anatole France quote is a rich one, but of course I can't find it. But we have another quote from James Madison, who I always like to fall back on. This again going back to the role of the warfare state, of the constant militarization, of the endless expansion of bases overseas. This is what Madison said. Constant apprehension of war has the same tendency to render the head too large for the body. A standing military force with an overgrown executive will not long be safe companions to liberty. The means of defense against foreign danger have always been the instruments of tyranny at home. And I think we are witnessing that today with the growth of this enormous internal intelligence surveillance system. And these guys understood that. And I think it's, we must pay attention to the past if we are able to understand the future. FDR, who was not, in current terms, he's probably would be a total radical and would not even get the Democratic nomination today if he were around. But this is what he said in the 1930s. The liberty of a democracy is not safe if the people tolerate the growth of a private power to the point where it becomes stronger than their democratic state itself. That, in essence, is fascism. When you have the growth of enormous private power, it will further diminish the possibilities of democracy. And Felix Frankfurter, or actually it was Louis Brandeis, who FDR appointed to the Supreme Court, he said you can have democracy or you can have great inequality, but you cannot have both. And right now in the US we see this enormous growth of inequality, that this very unstable system is constantly producing more and more. We've seen, particularly since Reagan, the number of busts have been increasing in frequency as well as duration. So you had the recessions in the early 1980s, late 1980s, the S&L collapse, the internet bubble, the housing bubble, and each one of these is more intense than the previous one. So if I were a doctor looking at this patient, my diagnosis would be that this patient, this economic system, is inherently unstable. And we need to think about creating some kind of alternative. I can hear people, kind of whispering. So what do you propose? The Soviet Union? Do you want some kind of, Stalinist, top-down, command economy? No, we're not saying that at all. I think we need to be very creative, like that great 20th century philosopher, Muhammad Ali said, float like a butterfly but sting like a bee. Because the Soviet Union, by the way, had nothing to do with socialism. Absolutely nothing. They stole the good name of socialism and put it in its title, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. We don't want gulags. We don't want politburos. We don't want top-down, hierarchical, patriarchal systems of control and domination. We want community control. We want bottom-up democracy, not top-down plutocracy, which is what we have today. And I think it's only through collective action. Now, I know that, collective, again, people are thinking, you're talking about gulags and things like, no. It's only through collective action that we're going to address the environmental crisis. There is no greater threat to humankind than what is looming. It's unprecedented. I mean, you hear this word a lot these days. I mean, I come from a state where in the last 4 months, we have had unprecedented forest fires and unprecedented flooding and unprecedented droughts. The drought continues, even though we have that massive flooding in September. And more we see from the Philippines, other disasters, the fires in Australia. I mean, if you cannot read the handwriting on the wall, we need to increase those fonts, dramatically, maybe to 24 or to 48, so that we can make the connections between what has become the routinization of severe weather and connect it with global warming, with fossil fuel productions, and we need to be thinking about this urgently. And what is so striking is the lack of any sense of urgency. I mean, I feel it, but it's not translated into the halls of Congress. It's not translated into the power system, because the power system is joined at the hip with the corporations who want to continue business as usual. I mean, this is what they're about. They're about generating profits. They're not about protecting the earth, although when you see those ExxonMobil commercials on PBS, about we're green and we're protecting the earth, and BP takes out full-page ads, and again, you have to wonder at the audacity of these people. Do they think we're complete idiots out here? Apparently they do, because they keep putting out those ads that try and promote themselves as protectors of the environment, and they'll show pandas and platypuses and walruses and some scientists petting them, and that meanwhile they are destroying the environment. I mean, this is the reality, and the lack of political urgency, I think, is very, very disturbing, and quite frankly, nothing lasts forever. You think we're here forever? We're not. I mean, we're all going to die, of course. But the planet itself is in jeopardy, and nothing lasts forever. And I want to read, if I may, a couple of poems. I think one is particularly apropos about some of the things I've been talking about this evening, and that is this whole notion of fear. Because once you're afraid, they've got you. Like in Orwell in 1984, once the state has got you on its heels, that you must go to them as your protector against evil, then essentially you've lost yourself. You've surrendered your autonomy to this larger entity. There was a great Egyptian poet, he was of Greek origin, named Constantine Cavafy. He was born in the Mediterranean city of Alexandria. He was born in 1864. He died in 1933. This happened to be Edward Said's favorite poems. It's one of my favorite poems. It's called Waiting for the Barbarians. Don't know if you're familiar with it at all. Coetzee, who's the South African novelist, wrote a book with this title. He won a Nobel Prize a couple of years ago. And it speaks a lot to the situation that I think we find ourselves in. Waiting for the barbarians. What are we waiting for? Assembled in the forum. The barbarians are due here today. Why isn't anything happening in the Senate? Why do the senators just sit there? Because the barbarians are coming today. What laws can the senators make now? Once the barbarians are here, they'll be in charge. Why did our emperor get up so early? Why is he sitting at the city's main gate on his throne, wearing the crown? Because the barbarians are coming today, and the emperor is waiting to receive them. He has even prepared a scroll to give him with titles and imposing names. Why have our councils come out today wearing their embroidered togas? Why have they put on bracelets? Why are they carrying elegant canes, beautifully worked in silver and gold? Because the barbarians are coming today. And things like that dazzle the barbarians. Why don't our distinguished orators come forward as usual and make speeches and say what they have to say? Because the barbarians are coming today, and they're bored by rhetoric and public speaking. Why this sudden restlessness, this confusion? Why are the streets and squares emptying so rapidly? Everyone going home. Because night has fallen, and the barbarians have not come. And some who have just returned from the border say, there are no barbarians anywhere. And now, what's going to happen to us without barbarians? They were, in a way, a kind of solution. Marge Piercy is a great contemporary American poet. She has a collection of poems called The Moon is Always Female. And this is called The Low Road. And again, it's about solidarity and the efficacy of collective action. What can they do to you? Whatever they want. They can set you up, they can bust you, they can break your fingers, they can burn your brain with electric shocks, blow you with drugs till you can't walk, can't remember. They can take your child, they can do anything. You can't stop them. How can you stop them? Alone you can fight, you can refuse, you can take what revenge you can, but they just roll over you. But two people fighting back to back can cut through a mob. Two people can keep each other sane, can give support, conviction, love, massage, hope. Three people are a delegation, a committee, a wedge. With four you can play bridge and start an organization. With six you can rent a whole house, eat pie for dinner with no seconds, and hold a fundraising party. A dozen make a demonstration. 100 fill a hall. 100,000, 10 million, your own country. It goes on one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again, and they said no. It starts when you say we and know who you are and who you mean. And each day you mean one more. Marge Piercy. And I just want to bring to your attention also, in addition to those books I have here, the real, I hate to sound like a capitalist now that I've denounced the capitalist economic system, but this is the reality that we're functioning in. I have to pay for, I have to pay the bills too. And until that promised land comes, we have to keep working within this system. There are 4 CDs here, including Richard Wolff, who just spoke on Monday on Naked Capitalism. Noam Chomsky, which is going to be on KUFM next Monday. The U.S. is a rogue state. It's a brand new talk he gave last month. Vandana Shiva, the great Indian speaker on GMOs, and David Bacon on immigration policy. So you get all 4 of these for just 20 balloons. If you got them from Boulder, it'd be like $65. So that's the deal tonight, and there are books here as well. I'd like to close with, that's an applause line, by the way. Usually people gasp out, finally, Jesus Christ, I thought this guy's, he's from New York, he's going on like Woody Allen, is he ever going to end? Well, I'm not as funny as Woody Allen. But this is a poem that actually I read last time and that Betsy asked me to read again because I think for obvious reasons. It was originally written in Urdu by the greatest Urdu poet of this period. His name was Faiz Ahmed Faiz. He was born in Sialkot in Punjab, which is now in Pakistan, in 1911, and he died in 1984. And this poem is known throughout South Asia, not just in Pakistan, but in India and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. You go to demonstrations and you see these three letters in Urdu or even in English sometimes, B-O-L, bol. It means speak. And this is his most famous political poem. Bol ke lab azad hai tere, bol zaban ab tak teri hai. Speak, your lips are free. Speak, your tongue is still yours. This magnificent body is still yours. Speak, your life is still yours. Speak, there is little time, but little though it is enough time. Enough before the body perishes, before the tongue atrophies. Speak, the truth still lives. Say what you have to say. Speak, your lips are free. Bol. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, and don't forget to support the Rankin Center. Become a member, do what you can. You know, they got me here. Hopefully they'll bring me here again. So really a great institution right here in Missoula. And I did find that little ditty I wanted to read to you, which speaks to a lot of what's going on. It's from 1821, England. The law locks up the hapless felon who steals the goose from off the common. The law locks up the hapless felon who steals the goose from off the common, but lets the greater felon loose who steals the common from the goose. And that goes back to the looting of the earth versus someone stealing pizza or driving away from a gas station without paying for gas. So I think we have a little bit of time. How are we doing on time? We've got time. And then I'll be happy to sign some books for you. Yes, I'll be speaking in Helena tomorrow, by the way. If you have any friends in Helena, I'll be speaking at Carroll College in the afternoon and at an Episcopal church in the... There you go. At 7 o'clock in Helena. So if you have any friends or you want to subject yourself to more masochistic tirades, then see you in Helena as well. Yes, in the back. The back shall be first.
My back?
No, that back. Way back.
Michelle.
Very quickly, could you give your opinion about the presidency of Obama, which is still going on, of course? As you know, he was no socialist, but he was elected on a huge, provoking a huge enthusiasm. He wanted, for instance, to reform healthcare, limit, put back regulation on Wall Street, and all that was a great disappointment. Is he a pure dupe of the system? Was he prisoner of the system?
Did everybody hear the question? It's about Obama, and was he a dupe of the system, and what happened to all the promises of his 2008 campaign? This is a question that frequently comes up at lectures, and I know people like Chomsky are asked this all the time. I don't think it's a very interesting or important question because I think what is critical are the institutions in which these individuals find themselves. So let's say, you know, I'm David Barsamian, I've got all these great ideas, I've got noble thoughts, I want to protect the environment. But then I'm elected senator or congressperson or president, and then all of a sudden I find my ability to maneuver has been severely limited. Where I thought I had this much space to operate, turns out I have this much space to operate, and even that is shrinking because of the pressures from lobbies and other trajectories within the U.S. Political system. I mean, it's no secret that lobbies exert tremendous control over policy. And I'm talking about small groups of people. Look at the Cuban lobby in Miami. They've kept in place what is arguably one of the most insane U.S. policies in history, the economic boycott and strangulation of this little island, off the coast of Florida for over 50 years now. Look at the power that is exerted by AIPAC and the pro-Israel lobby. Look at the power of the gun lobby, of the big agriculture that insists on getting these subsidies every year. So you have institutional imperatives that extremely limit one's ability to act. Now, someone like Franklin Roosevelt, almost because he came from a patrician class, and because the magnitude of the Great Depression was so enormous that capitalism itself was in danger of collapsing. I mean, people were out in the streets. There were general strikes in Seattle, in San Francisco. There was rebellion in the air. There was a growth of socialist and communist parties in this country that has never been seen before or since. And so the space for someone like FDR did expand a bit, and he was able to institute certain things which we are still benefiting from today. Unemployment insurance, Social Security, those kinds of things, minimum wage. I mean, there was no minimum wage in the United States before the New Deal. Some people would say there's still no minimum wage for people who work in restaurants and depend on tips. Their minimum wage is $2.15. I know people that work night shifts, and it's bad weather, nobody shows up. They don't make any, they make $2.15 an hour. That's it. That's what they take home. So I think to focus on individuals is not very fruitful. I won't say it's not entirely without interest, because it is like psychologically, what happened here. I think we have to look at the institutions of power and hegemonic thinking that produce certain outcomes that individuals find a great difficulty in finessing. That, in short, I think is what happened to Obama. In 2007 and 2008, I remember I was lecturing in India at the time, and people were yelling at me in the audience, literally, because I was being critical of Obama, who they saw as this great hope from America. And I said, it looks like he'll be a more efficient manager of the system than Bush was. And I think that has proven to be relatively accurate. Also, he had the quality of being able to speak English, which you shouldn't. I mean, after 8 years of mumbo jumbo and dangling participles and no verbs and no pronouns, I mean, people took this seriously. Wow, let's be proud of someone in the White House who can actually speak the English language, can complete a sentence, and God forbid, even a whole paragraph that makes sense. I think this was, again, it was partly a reaction to Bush as well. Yes, this woman had her hand up, I believe.
Early on in your talk, you said, if there is a history written of this period, it will scarcely be believed. Now, I'm kind of curious about the if.
Well, I think it should be transparent, because if the predictions and prognostications of the scientists continue, and if there is no rollback on global warming, I think the species itself, for the first time, might be facing, again, I hate to use a word like extinction, but is facing great danger. in the long term. That's what we're facing. And it's very hard to get your head around that. It's hard, like when you're a kid, you look at your parents and you think they're going to live forever, right? You can't imagine them dying. So it's very hard to conceive of that kind of collective death for the planet. But we see species of plant life, insects and animals that are disappearing. Again, a word that has become banal in its overusage, unprecedented. I don't think Pachamama can keep taking this hammering that it's taking. It's simply going to erupt, and it is erupting, in typhoons and tsunamis and hurricanes and droughts and flooding. All of these things are manifestations of an earth that is heaving internally because of what's happening to it, what we're doing to it. Yes, someone else? Yes?
Well, I was just going to bring up that Democracy Now! Is in Missoula. It's on the student station, KBGA, 89.9 and 11.
Good. And you can, of course, use the internet. Again, the internet becomes a tool of audio and visual resistance. There's a lot of good things you can find there. You can also find alternative radio podcasts for free, if you can't download a program. And I don't know if I said this earlier, but I'm sure KUFM gets lots of negative comments from listeners about alternative radio and all these radical voices. So, you should kind of let them know that you support the program and their right, their ability to broadcast it. That would be good. Yes, in the back.
David, in this drumbeat of bad news about the climate, you look at Montana and we're ground zero for the kind of choices that have to be made. The Saudi Arabia wind, and yet we have the largest coal mine proposal in the world right now in Otter Creek. We have to choose between the two. And I look at your community and what you are doing as far as community ownership of power. And
yes, in Boulder. He's talking about the recent election
right,
in Boulder.
I wanted to hear whether you thought that was a good thing and whether that was perhaps a model for communities like Missoula that can get off of the bad news march and move toward a sane future.
The gentleman is referring to a recent initiative in Boulder, which was passed overwhelmingly by the people of Boulder to take over the private electricity company, Xcel. This is the first time that I know of that a fairly large community in the United States has taken this step where there'll be community control of energy. I must also say, in that same election, 4 communities in Colorado have passed anti-fracking ordinances. I know this is, again, a big issue here in Montana and in Washington State and Idaho as well. So these are very, I think, positive developments in terms of citizen involvement, but also providing an alternative for other communities. Now, I don't know the situation here in Missoula. If this is your hometown, you know better what the possibilities are. But I think there was an excellent article in Yes magazine, and there's been other media coverage about how people in Boulder, just people, ordinary citizens, I mean, we're not talking about, Einsteins here, maybe there was 1 or 2 in the group, but ordinary citizens who got together and were organized and put this presentation on the ballot, and were able to, I must say, successfully campaign against a massive corporate propaganda. I mean, Xcel, this energy company, they just weren't sitting back. They were sending out brochures, and we got daily mailings, saying, you want to live in the dark. You know how they always go to these apocalyptic endings, right? To scare people. Do you want to be in the candle in the dark? That's what you're going to get if you vote for this proposition. And so we were all bombarded with this propaganda, and it didn't work. People saw through it for what it was. So it's a very positive development. And I'm aware of the Powder River coal deposits. It's absolutely enormous. But again, in the Northwest at least, I know that a lot of people are fighting back. I mentioned towns that I've visited recently where coal trains have been blocked, and there have been other actions against the continued extraction of the filthiest of all the fossil fuels, which is coal, which is without question accelerating global warming. Now, if you think global warming is a threat to the planet and to humanity, and I think you should think that, then we have to take steps to reverse that. Otherwise, the outcome is going to be dire indeed. So again, I hate to sound like a Cassandra, but I feel a certain obligation to give you information that is based on not opinion or what I believe, but is based on scientific fact and information that is available, that scientists have been warning about since 1992. And we continue to ignore that at our great peril. Yes, sir.
Do you have any idea how the high school students that you talked to today took your message? I assume that you had the same kind of message.
Oh no, it was rather different. It wasn't as I would say information dense and as analytical. But Betsy was there, and I bet you she has a better take on that kind of exchange. What did you make of that?
Well, I think he did a great job of telling them that, and I think they heard the message, that journalism needs to go beyond the little infomercial surface information and ask the question why, and be curious and try to find out what's behind those stories, what's behind the typhoons and the unprecedented weather stuff. Why is it happening? And I think he did a great job, and I think they all heard that.
I mean, what you want to do with younger audiences in particular is to try and plant seeds. And kids already are skeptical, right? I mean, their favorite word is no. So parents will recognize this almost immediately. So to kind of expand that skepticism to politics, to the economy, to government, to other institutions in society, I think it's a healthy thing. And so that's what you try and plant little seeds, and who knows what will grow in that group. But no one fell asleep. No one was yawning. These are always telltale signs. And it was, it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's kind of like right after lunch when they should be kind of dozing off.
One of the kids said, so you're telling us to ask questions and look behind whatever it is that we're told. It's like, yes, very good. We could tell that to a lot of adults too. So.
My voice is going, and I've got 3 events tomorrow in Helena, so I'd like to thank you once again. I really appreciate your turning out and your enthusiasm, and I hope you get engaged in doing something locally for your community, for your region, for the country, and for the planet. So thanks a lot for coming.